Make yourself at my home, tell me where you been. Pour yourself something cold, baby, cheers to this. Sometimes you gotta stay in, and you know where I live. Yeah, you know what we is. Sometimes you gotta stay in. Welcome to my house, baby, take control now. We can't even slow down. We don't have to go a while. Welcome to my house, play that music too loud. Show me what you do now. We don't have to go a while. Welcome to my house. Welcome to my house. Morning comes and you know that you wanna stay. Close the blinds, let's pretend that the time has changed. Keep our clothes on the floor, open up champagne. Let's continue tonight, come on, celebrate. That's how we do. Sometimes you gotta stay in, and you know where I live. Yeah, you know what we is. Sometimes you gotta stay in. Welcome to my house, baby, take control now. We can't even slow down. We don't have to go a while. Welcome to my house, play that music too loud. Show me what you do now. We don't have to go a while. Welcome to my house. Welcome to my house. Welcome to my duck off the crib, the spot, the pad. But my house is your house if you throwing it back. Excuse me if my home draining the sand. Soon as these happy faces land, you can run with the cash. Home run, slam dunk, touchdown pass. Mi casa es tu casa, so it ain't no holding back. Another shot of vodka, you know what's in my glass. It's my house, just relax. Welcome to my house, baby, take control now. We can't even slow down. We don't have to go a while. Welcome to my house, play that music too loud. Show me what you do now. We don't have to go a while. Welcome to my house.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are connecting from today. Please let us know where that is. It would be awesome to know where everybody is either watching or listening this from. So just post it in the chat. Let us know where that place is. Um, by the way, I gotta say something about that song, right? And we just put it in there because we like it, but also because when I think about Hacking HR, not because I created it, but because that's the way I feel about this community that it's been built by all of us together. I am hoping that you feel it is like a home for you. It is like a place where you can come and build a tribe and be safe, ask your questions and be curious and connect with other people and build meaningful connections. And that's all what at the end of the day happens in your home, in a house. And I am hoping that that's how you feel about Hacking HR. So you are all, of course, welcome to this community, to this house. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. This conversation is part of our Hacking HR April series. We have a number of great sessions planned for the rest of the month. If any of you missed the sessions that we had as part of our Hacking HR March series, you can go to the Hacking HR Lab, hackinghr.io, create your account or sign up or log in to your existing account and check out the many sessions that we have in there, including all of the sessions that we had as part of the Hacking HR March series. At the same time, I want to invite you all to join us for the Hacking HR May series. I know it's kind of a strange to think that May is coming just in 3 weeks from now. What's going on with time? But it's coming in 3 weeks. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So the entire agenda that we build for the Hacking HR May series is all around mental health. It's all about mental health and, of course, holistic wellness and well-being. And I am hoping that you join us as part of the Hacking HR May series. Of course, we're also going to be sharing a lot of content about mental health in our social media channels. And also, we already released the agenda for the Hacking HR June series. I know that sounds a little bit farther out, but it's only 2 months away from now. So for June, it's all going to be about career development and job search. So all the panels, all the sessions that we built for the Hacking HR June series are about helping you with career development, with your job search, whether you are an actively looking for a job, whether you are currently employed but also open to opportunities. We created an incredible agenda that goes from how to craft an incredible resume to how to address career gaps in your resume to how highlight your so-called soft skills, which I don't like to call them that way, by the way. They are harder than the technical skills, but how to highlight those quote-unquote soft skills in your resume. And we're also going to be talking about how to master your interview skills, your negotiation skills, your ability to highlight transferable skills. And we have received this question a lot, by the way, and we are going to be talking about that in the Hacking HR June series, which is how to sort of manage this idea of moving from one industry to another when in your resume you don't necessarily are reflecting the skills for that new career, for that new industry. So all of that, we're going to be talking about all of that in the Hacking HR June series, which you can sign up for today by going to our community, hackinghr.io, creating your account or signing in to your existing account. So let's talk about a guide for inclusive language, which is the content of the conversation that we are going to have today. Before I welcome our panel, I want to tell you a little story, right? Before I was aware of this, years ago, it's a journey for everybody. It's an evolution for everybody. Before I was aware of anything related to inclusive language, it's not that I was using in any way discriminatory or openly discriminatory or exclusive language. But for example, things like this, right? That I only learned as I am part of this journey. For example, if you do an event and you say, ladies and gentlemen, which we never do, you are excluding part of the people who are, for example, non-gender conforming. And that to me was a new thing for me, right? It was quite the realization. But ladies and gentlemen, even though you may think that you are including everybody, you're not. But that's part of the journey to build inclusive language. For example, another thing that I stopped doing, and I still struggle with this, by the way, especially in my social circle, not necessarily my professional work, but I still struggle with this, is calling everybody guys. Saying to everybody, hello guys, how are you doing? Not everybody's a guy, and in fact, in this panel, only me is the guy. So, and you will see that soon. So even in my emails, whenever I would respond to somebody, that was a little bit of a struggle between the way I used to do things and the way I acknowledged was more inclusive and more respectful of the people that I was bringing to these conversations. Again, I'm still in this journey, but all I'm trying to say here is I'm encouraging you to be very open-minded about the conversation that we are about to have, to not think that there's something wrong with you because you called people guys, or because you stood up in front of an audience and said, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and you didn't know better perhaps back then. I am hoping that you stay open-minded in this conversation and acknowledge that this is a journey. We are all evolving here. Inclusive language is an evolution. So please be open-minded to this conversation and make sure that you ask your questions about inclusive language. So Jessa, please bring everybody to the panel. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Danny, Andrew, Emma, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It's exciting to see you all, to be moderating a panel, which I haven't done in a while because, we have so many events going on that it's hard to, clone myself to so many different things. But it's been very exciting, all the conversations that we've had. So what I want to ask you to do is to introduce yourselves. So please let us know your name, where you're connecting from, what you do, whatever else you want to do. And I want to ask you this. I share my story. I share my story of calling people ladies and gentlemen, which is not inclusive, or calling everybody guys, which is not inclusive either. I want to ask you if there's a story of evolution in your own inclusive language that you want to share with the community. Something that you are like, before I did this, then I became more aware, and now I do this. And it's been, evidently more inclusive, which is what we're talking about. So that together with your introduction will set us off in the right path. So please, anybody just unmute yourself, go ahead, and then we move on from there.
Awesome.
Go ahead. Yes. Hi.
Yeah, I'll get us started. So I'm Danny Herrera. I'm an ED&I professional. I do a million things. I have my day job, but I also do a lot of volunteering, and I founded an organization to help recruiters and talent professionals become a little bit more inclusive in the way that they do their job. And on top of that, I also have a background in translation. And I'm actually very, very passionate about inclusive language. I have like a lot of certifications and a lot of stuff that I do with inclusive language. And about a story, mine might not be necessarily about like gender inclusive language, but it's a little bit more about accessible language. So this is something that I'm still learning about, and accessible language is also part of inclusive language. I'm learning about it every single day, but learning how to write more inclusive and accessible alt text in the images that we have or that we share in social media, that's something that I'm doing every single day. Like I'm struggling with it. I'm not gonna lie, but I'm learning.
Oh, that well. Thank you for sharing that you are struggling with it, because you are you're awesome to begin with. We've known each other for a while, and I think you're amazing, and you're sharing so many powerful messages through your social media. You are in this space of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and you are on a journey yourself. That recognition gives other people permission as well to say, if Danny, who is an expert, she acknowledges that she's still struggling with this, maybe I'm giving up myself a little bit of grace that I don't know much about this, but I'm on a journey. I am on that journey. So I appreciate that, Danny. Thank you so much. And welcome to the conversation. Andrew, let's go with you.
I love Danny's story. Hi, Enrique and everybody else. Thank you for making me part of this amazing panel. It's awesome to partner with Hacking HR all the time. My name's Anju Chaudhary. My pronouns are she and her. And I work as a head of content for Skillsoft. I work from Bay Area. And my story was English not my first language. I grew up in India. I learned a lot of English by watching TV channel news shows, and hey guys was so common, and it still continues to be. So of course that was one of the thing, and I probably continue making that mistake, but remind myself over and over again. But I believe this idea about having a conversation, and if somebody makes a mistake, giving them grace and space to learn and grow is what we are trying to talk about. One of the mistakes that I see and had committed quite often was when you have spreadsheets and a lot of data collection, calling something as a master sheet, primary or main could be one. But I did not think about it. Calling an all hands call is an ableist language versus a town hall or a team call and things like that. So I'm on my own learning journey, and I'd love to take some nuggets out of this conversation. Thank you for having me, Enrique.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Andrew. And I gotta say, ableist language and the language of inclusion of people with disabilities or who experience a disability, that has been quite the journey for me, because it's it's newer language perhaps, but at the same time it is in contrast with a lot of things that we are very used to saying. And I gotta say, one of the hardest things for me is not calling things, this is a crazy thing to do, or that is a crazy thing to do. That even that word, which is so common to define everything that is a little bit chaotic, to remove it from my vocabulary has been a hard thing to do. So I appreciate you bringing, an expanded sort of idea to inclusive language, and we're going to be talking more about this. So welcome, Andrew. And last but not least, Emma. Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone. So great to see you. So great to be here with everyone. My name is Emma McKee. I'm a director of DEIB NC for Belonging Culture at a national nonprofit organization. And inclusive language is a topic just near and dear to my heart. It excites me. I love those aha moments that you have. And many people have already talked about continuing to learn. This is an area that for sure, I think you feel that day in and day out, that opportunity to grow. So it's a really, it's a wonderful area if you're passionate about it, but it also is, it's so empowering once you really start leaning into the practice of inclusive language. And so I'm in the New York area in general. And something that stands out to me is in line with the evolution of inclusive language and how it can evolve and change over time. An aha moment for me not too long ago actually was in the change from calling pronouns preferred pronouns to just pronouns, right? This is such a clear example of how inclusive language can change over time. Because for a while, the inclusive way to talk about pronouns was to say your preferred pronouns. It was thought to be really kind and open and allowing people that space to share, right? But over time, people said, no, preferred is not part of an identity. Identity is identity. It's a fact. It's true to people. It's not a preference. So we need to take that word out if we want to continue making this language more inclusive and be better. So I love that example as showing how it changes over time and keeping that open mind, as Enrique was saying in the beginning. So glad to be here.
Well, I just learned one thing new, by the way. I didn't know what you just said. I didn't know about that. I didn't know.
There you go.
I actually didn't even notice that. I remember seeing your preferred pronouns,
right?
And now I just see pronouns, but it's only because you are saying it that I am thinking about the instances in which I've seen that I am now realizing, yeah, it's not the same as it used to be, but I didn't even know that. So that's incredible. I mean, talking about evolution, right? Even the things that were supposed to be inclusive before are getting even more inclusive by recognizing identity and not just using words that seem to sort of show that you're being inclusive. So thank you for that, Emma, and all of you. Welcome once again to this conversation. So let me ask you this: what is inclusive language? Let's begin there. Let's just start with the foundation. What is inclusive language, and why using inclusive language is important in the workplace? I think we can actually spend 1 hour in this one question, but I'm hoping that we can ask more questions. But what is inclusive language, and why is it important in the workplace? Anybody, just please unmute yourself. Go ahead. I'll give you a second to actually think about this, because I want to go back to the audience and thank everybody for being here. Well, once again, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. If you have any questions, if you yourself have any story that you want to share with the community and you feel comfortable doing so, please post it in the chat. Would love to, see what everybody else is sharing. So be active part. I encourage you all to be active part of this conversation in the chat. So coming back to the panel, what is inclusive language? Why is it important in the workplace? Just unmute yourself and go ahead. Danny, go ahead.
I think I can get us started. And of course, I mean, a lot of this might sound like obvious, if you may, but inclusive language is language that is inclusive of everyone, language that is welcoming, language that is intentionally inclusive. What I mean by that is that we are not excluding anyone with the words or the language that we say. And that could mean pretty much like thinking about the spectrum of diversity. We are talking about gender and sexual orientation and age and nationality and ability and disability. So it's a very large umbrella. But something that we might not necessarily think about when we think about inclusive language, like related to something that you were saying before, Enrique, is sometimes we use either words or phrases as using crazy or lame or insane, and we don't necessarily think about the consequences, right? Like who could be excluding or hurting with the language that we say. And that is also true for some of the phrases that we use on our day-to-day, like saying something like long time no see. That is uninclusive language as well. That phrase was created in a way to mock Chinese immigrants back in the day when Chinese immigrants were brought into the United States to do like free labor, if you may, or very, very cheap labor. So again, it's about thinking intentionally about the way that we communicate, not only orally, but also in writing and with the images that we use and with like every single aspect of our communication. So hopefully that makes sense.
It does. It does. Thank you. Thank you, Danny. Andrew?
Yeah. And thank you, Danny, for that example. Also, you mentioned about images. So you're still saying a lot without using verbal. So I want people to think that communication is not just about the words you're using. Also, when you're using the words, communication is not what you say, but how it's heard. Making the changes to use more inclusive language offers us a chance to grow and become better. You'd asked about why is it important, and I want to address that, because inclusive language is important because it acknowledges and affirms diversity of people in our society, and it helps to create a more welcoming, respectful, and inclusive environment for everyone. It can also help to reduce discrimination and prejudice and stereotypes that usually come into place, and recognizing the value that different people bring. This language can avoid misunderstanding and misrepresentation. For example, somebody using the words like, oh, I'm obsessed, or I'm OCD about it, I think is absolutely something that is a biased language, and also it's a medical diagnosis. So do not use these words lightly. A lot more people, according to a Glassdoor survey, 67% of job seekers are looking at diverse workplaces, and these wouldn't be diverse and inclusive unless the communication is inclusive. And a study by McKinsey and Company found that companies in top quartile are gender and ethnic diversity, and those diverse people from diverse backgrounds thrive when there is inclusive practices, including inclusive communication. There is this idea about people using words that are very legacy. We've been using them forever, but it's time that we look at it from the lens of, are they inclusive? Mankind or manpower versus
Oh my gosh,
humanity
yeah.
and workforce. Using language like he or she without, when you're not sure, instead using a very gender neutral term, they and them. And I notice actually, even my children, though they're pretty young, at school, they're using very gender neutral term. And I was really impressed by that now people are more aware and trying to be proactive. The idea that when you are not consciously inclusive, you're unconsciously excluding other people. So it needs more intention. It needs to be very focused effort by everybody, and create a safe space that you can actually stop somebody and say, hey, I think I'm curious, why would you use this word? Or telling them that this is not an inclusive term.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I'm just thinking about what you just said, and being the moderator is hard to think and then ask the questions. So, but thank you for sharing that. Emma, please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I just love listening to Danny and Anju talk, because everything you said resonates so deeply. So all I will do is add maybe 2 quick points to build on what they've already said. So another thought that comes to mind when we think about what is inclusive language, I think an important aspect of it is really understanding that it's a communication that considers the norms, the expectations, and even the behaviors that we're implying by using our language as well. So thinking about the phrases we use, the words we use, the identities we incorporate into examples within certain contexts. What we're doing is also we're putting out there, what sorts of norms and behaviors are fitting into our group, our organization, whatever group of people you are communicating with. So I think that's a really good thought process as well when we think about what is inclusive language. It's about what are we really saying about those expectations and norms and behaviors through the language that we're using. And then as far as, why is it important? Another thing that we have found in my organization, we do a lot of conversation around inclusive language, and we really have found that it is a wonderful foundational tool for the rest of DEIB work. So it empowers people. It creates this place, Anju was saying safe space, right? And it really helps to create that safe space. It empowers people to be able to talk about DEIB in a way that they're comfortable, that they feel is really articulating what they mean. So it's a fantastic foundational tool for furthering the broader DEIB work.
Oh, I love that. And this is thank you, Emma. And this is a great segue actually to what I want to ask you next. And if we had a time travel machine and we go back to say the 16th century or 14th century, you had people that said the Earth is at the center of the universe, and some of the people saying it's not, right? And the people who said that the Earth was at the center of the universe, they probably could have said the others have a culture war on me, because they are saying that the Earth is not at the center of the universe, but they were wrong. And think about that right now, and you have people that are saying that because of we use pronouns, or or in a more expanded fashion, more inclusive language, it's a culture war. They are wrong, and we know that they are wrong, but it's maybe hard for them to get out of their heads and understand that the Earth is not the center of the universe, and we already knew that, and that not using pronouns or respecting the way people want to be approached or the proper language is also wrong. Now, how do we approach then those conversations? How do we, if you go to work and you have people saying, I'm not going to use your pronouns, or I'm not going to use this language, or I'm going to continue saying guys or mankind or salesman or crazy, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. How do you approach those conversations, which, by the way, are so very common still, even though we have so much more awareness of the impact of using language that is not inclusive? So, question for all of you. I'll give you a second to think about that, because I want to go back to the audience. And whenever I ask a question to the panel, by the way, I also encourage you all in the audience to say something about this as well. So if you have any idea, any response, any thoughts about this, about the questions that I'm asking, please post them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that and try as much as possible to bring it to bring your ideas to the attention of the panel. So Anju, I know you unmuted yourself. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to say the idea is we want to bring people in instead of leaving people out. So if that's the intention, even if people are not yet on board, there could be few reasons. And approaching that from a place of curiosity is the best approach that I've found. I like the diagram that, imagine there's a red circle, and that's a green circle, and that's like your comfort zone, things that you can have a conversation around. And then there is a yellow zone, things you probably know a little bit, but not so comfortable. And then there is a red zone. So if you provide people that structure and say, there are things I can probably speak about feminism or gender inclusion, etc., but with disability or differently abled people, I probably have a constraint, or I do not understand that language really well. I find it hard, but something that I can navigate. And then there's a broader space of mental health and other issues that I probably do not consider myself an expert. There's still so much for me to learn about. We expect people to stay in their green zone, but navigate the yellow zone. And if it's approaching red, you can take a break, right? So that creates a psychological safety. If people do not want to even navigate the yellow zone, approach from a place of curiosity. You said something, and I'm curious why you said XYZ, and ask to start a conversation. There'll still be people who still are not on that journey, allowing them to start small and bite-sized. This is my learning and development hat, to give people an opportunity to start step by step. Somebody who's never had a conversation around D&I, and we expect them to jump in and talk about pronouns with proficiency, is not a good ask yet. But invite them in, allow people to learn and grow, and then have conversation. Who shall I ask if I have a question about XYZ? Provide them resources to take it at their own time, but allowing panel discussions like this, having discussion circles, closed door conversations, sometimes really important when people don't know how to navigate this. It's a big, wide world, and it's evolving, like you rightly said, Enrique. So we're going to make mistakes. And if microaggressions and things like that happen, how are you going to approach? And if people have clarity, then they would be able to walk with you on that journey.
Yeah. And you're making me think about a couple of things. One of them is being patient, because there are people who truly are new in this journey. If they had already started that journey at all, they are very new, and not knowing how to do things, or not having that level of awareness. We can judge that in whatever way we want, but we have to be very patient about bringing them on board as an ally on that journey. And the second thing that I thought about was sometimes the celebration of small successes. If you had somebody who has never ever addressed people by their pronouns, and one day, because you have gone through that journey, they are doing that. That's maybe there are still behaviors to change, but that's already a reason to celebrate, because that's quite an advancement for one person that wasn't doing that before. So I just wanted to bring this idea of patience and celebration, even if it's a small gain, because that's still a gain. So, Andrew, thank you for that. Danny, we go with you and then Emma.
Awesome. Yeah, no, what I wanted to add, yes, to everything that Andrew said, but I do want to like maybe put a light in something, right? Like I think that there's a difference in like people that are learning about it, because of course, like inclusive language is very wide. It's an umbrella of a million things, and that's
Yeah.
completely fine. Not everyone is like aware of what we mean when we talk about inclusive language. However, when we are talking about misgendering someone,
Yeah.
I think that there is a line
Yeah.
there that we need to be very clear with the things that are okay, like the mistakes that are okay to make. Like, of course, every single mistake is okay to like to make and have a conversation about. But if the same person is making the same mistake multiple times on purpose, that's a different conversation that we
Yeah.
need to have, right? Because yes, of course, the allyship journey, that's completely fine. We can talk about it, we can work on it specifically with every single person. But I think that there is a difference when someone is denying the other person's identity and is crossing the line to being disrespectful and hurtful.
Yeah.
So I think that that's also a different conversation that we
Yeah.
might want to tackle.
Yeah. No, and I love that, by the way, because in their case, they are aware of what the right thing to do is, and now they are going out of their way to not do that. It's not the opposite, which are the people that are genuinely getting into this journey who are, like, for example, somebody asking here, what should I use instead of manpower? That's a genuine question to ask. Now, if you know that the right thing to do is say personnel, people, staff, and you continue to use manpower over and over and over again, knowing that that's not an inclusive word, now you're going out of your way to not be inclusive. And that's, I am totally aligned with you in there, Danny, that requires a different approach, a different conversation now with that one person. So thank you for pointing that out. Emma, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just add that I think connecting this to individuals is a great way to also get them engaged. And so that's what I would recommend as well, is really make it personal for people.
I would say so, absolutely. And especially when you have diverse teams working together, and maybe the one person not understanding how their language may not be inclusive, not of the organization or all or of the world, but of their own teammates that are close to them in everyday interaction. So you make it very personal. Your relationship with this person, maybe you're harming it by using this or that kind of language. So thank you for bringing that up. Now, let me ask you this. It may feel like work, right? We are telling people you got to do more work now, because instead of saying, hey guys, now you got to think more inclusively, or instead of just using the word that everybody knows, manpower, or instead of saying mankind, which, by the way, I hate mankind. That one really triggers me. Instead of using those words that are your traditional vocabulary, now you really have to think through and think better, and even go and find out what is the inclusive replacement of a word like mankind or manpower or a guys. So how do we integrate inclusive language in our everyday interactions and communication, knowing that it's work, but knowing also that it's beneficial in the short and long run, even if you have to put a little bit of extra effort in the upfront? How do we do that?
I'd like to go. Thank you. This is a really good question, because what happens is you continue doing what you're doing, you continue getting the same results. And so first, for people to know that. Number two, intent versus impact. A lot of people continue doing what they're doing because they do not know the impact of it, which means, let's take the simple one. When we're saying, hey guys, we're actually signaling that in our organization or in our group, we're insinuating that men are preferred gender at our organization. So a better term would be, hey folks, hey people, hey teammates, or anything else like that. So what are we trying to say with the words we are using? Is when I was using it 15 years back, I meant, hey team, but I said, hey guys. So
Mhm.
the impact of that is really important for people to understand. Something very simple that we had actually implemented in our previous organization is with Slack, anytime somebody said, hey guys, and their statement started like that, Slack would prompt them and say, maybe you'd like to use a better or another term like, hey
Mhm.
group, hey folks. You can use technology for your benefit and it can
Yeah.
actually help you improve. When you're writing performance reviews and you change Anju's name to Enrique's and we remove and it still stays the same, then we're probably being very inclusive. So tools like Textio, which allows you to review a gendered language, or when you're saying we're looking for a go-getter and a rock star in your resume or in the job descriptions, people do not tend to apply. And that is because that language actually makes you feel that I'm not there yet, right? So you could use technology to your benefit and also explain to people what is the impact of them not using inclusive language.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing that I want to point out about your last point, Anju, about some of those words is that it's not Anju saying it. Anju is sharing a story of her not applying to a job because it said rockstar or whatever. This is science. It's data. This is all backed up with data. Textio, I love what they do, and I love the information they put out. So kudos for the work they do. But there's this great book, Invisible Women, and it's fascinating to see how you made me think about this, Anju, about how all the systems and everything we created in the world had men as the default gender. Everything is, manpower that assumes that all the workers are male, or mankind that assumes, which is very wrong, by the way, once again, that word triggers me, assumes that humankind is men, not, everybody else. So yeah, well, go ahead, please.
Policemen,
Policemen.
salesmen,
Yeah.
firemen, like everybody,
Yeah.
chairmen,
Yeah.
congressmen. There is
Yeah.
so much language that is part of our grandfathered, for example.
Yeah.
Still, legacy. A better word
I'm
is
trying
legacy.
to delete that one word from my vocabulary, by the way. This was grandfather from whatever. I'm trying with that one. It's believe me, once again, for everybody here, this is a journey. You're not born learned, especially you're not born learned about things that are evolving quickly and in the right direction. So give yourself some grace, acknowledge when you know you're using a word that is not inclusive, and be aware, because some words, I think there's a little bit of common sense to understand that they may not be inclusive. So, Danny, please go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add something very quickly when we are trying to help others understand like why we use inclusive language and why it is important. Something that I often do is like try to talk a little bit about like the evolution of language, as you were saying, Enrique, right? Like even when we are not talking about inclusive language per se, like if you think about, I don't know, like 50 years ago, like the word cell phone didn't exist, or
Yeah.
Netflix and chill, or like all of those words, right? And the language evolves and we learn new language and we use the language in the way that it's supposed to be used, or we use to mean something that we know it is what we are trying to mean. So that is also part of the conversation when we are trying to explain someone, okay, why we are no longer saying hey guys and we are pushing for hey everybody, right? Like it's the way that language evolves, and the reason why language evolves is because of course we evolve as a
Yeah.
community, as a mankind,
Right.
and we
Hulk.
find new ways to communicate with each other, and we also find new ways to, or we find new words to identify ourselves with. Maybe like 50 years ago, I don't know, like certain word didn't exist, but of course as more people start using a particular word, that word becomes like official between a million
Yeah.
air quotes, right? So um that's also one angle that I try to talk about whenever people like question like, but why do we have to like change the way that we talk? And it's not changing, it's actually evolving.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I love that because that requires, in my view, a high degree of open-mindedness, right? To say, we were saying this before, we evolved, and now we say it this way. And I'm watching. I know it's this like old shows, like from the 2000s, old shows, only 20 plus years ago, and there was this woman talking to a saleswoman and a salesman, and and the woman was pregnant. The woman that was a saleswoman was pregnant, and the person who was talking to them was referring to both of them as salesmen, and she was saying this as a woman. But if you think of, it's very hard to judge everything in hindsight, because we are in an evolved version of what happened in 2000. But we have to be open-minded to say that's not the right word anymore, because we evolved and now we are in a different place. So I shouldn't be using that word anymore. So I appreciate you bringing that up, Danny. Emma, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think just going back to your original prompt about how you get people to engage when, it's hard work. It's a skill and it takes practice, but you get better and better at it. And like any habit or like any skill that you practice, it becomes second nature. And so, at this point, every time I use a phrase, I Google it at this point, because it's just second nature to do that, to make sure that it's, that I know what I'm saying. And so I think that's really the biggest message there.
Yeah, I do that too, by the way. When I am confused about something, and when I realize that I don't know and I am not totally sure, I just go to Google and I say, what is the inclusive way to say this? It's just, I just do it now by default, but at the beginning it didn't come naturally. It required some intentionality behind it, and now it's become more of a habit, right? But it's exactly what you're saying. It's hard work at the beginning, then you're going to be reaping some of these benefits. But I'm going to use actually that to ask you this other question, right? What happens in an organization when we are using more inclusive language? And I ask you this question because I want people to, especially if they are beginning this journey of becoming more inclusive with the way they talk or write, I want them to know that the end goal is not putting more work on them, that the end goal is more beautiful and better than the way we're doing it right now. So what happens in an organization when people are intentionally using more inclusive language? What can we expect as a result of that? Danny, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I'm just going to tackle probably like the talent piece, because I'm sure that Andrew and Emma want to add their points of view as well. So going back to something that Andrew was saying a couple of minutes ago, thinking about talent acquisition, right? And the way that we write our job descriptions, or the way that we build our application website, or the pictures that we add, or the video that we add, or whether that website is accessible or not, what we are doing is we are attracting more candidates, right? So we are like thinking about it only from the talent acquisition standpoint, which is like a tiny piece of what a full organization is. We are amplifying our talent pool. So if you are part of an HR team or a recruiting team, or maybe you're a hiring manager and you're going like, well, but I can't find candidates for this particular role. Okay, maybe we need to take a look at the job description. Maybe we need to take a look at a careers page. Is our career page accessible? Can everybody apply? Do we have subtitles in the videos that we have on? Do we have alt text in the images that we have? Are we using inclusive language in the job description, knowing that that's going to, again, amplify our talent pool? And the same thing can be said throughout the entire interview process. Like, are we using inclusive language when we interview, when we write our feedback, when we make our decisions, when we extend an offer? So again, the benefits can be seen throughout the entire process. And as we were talking about before, there is so much data out there that actually shows the benefits of it. So I'm going to pass it on so the rest of the team can also share their thoughts.
Thank you, Danny. And you, Emma?
Yeah, I want to say what happens when we're inclusive is people feel seen, heard, and respected. I think that's what happens. What would you imagine happens when people feel seen, heard, and respected is they belong there. They want to do their best work every single day. They want to work for that organization. They want to talk about that organization with their friends and family and community. And amazing things happen. Magic happens when you find your space of belonging. I remember about 4 years back when I joined my previous role, the way they actually approached the entire interviewing process, as Danny mentioned, not just in the job description, but every time they would communicate with me and they would provide me feedback. They will send me notes, my onboarding, my interactions with the leaders, and them creating that space for me, which felt like I belonged there. As I joined around Diwali time, they celebrated the festival that's near and dear to me. And I was like, this is the place where I belong. And I really, really appreciate them recognizing me as a full person at that workplace. So I think magic happens. People really want to be seen, heard, and respected, and inclusive communication allows us to do that.
Love it. Thank you, Andrew. And in fact, we posted something just today, a few minutes ago, on our Hacking HR LinkedIn page, saying that it's ironic that this one of the strongest, if not the strongest, indicator of employee success, satisfaction, engagement is treating them with respect and dignity. And part of treating them with respect and dignity is including them, and part of including them is, using the proper language. So it's you just shared your story, and it's the story that represents that one quote we shared in there. Treating people with respect and dignity brings the best out of them at work in that in their condition as employees. So thank you for that. Emma, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it also grows exponentially. You get a couple people who start practicing inclusive language, and it encourages others to do the same, and it builds community, and it creates this collaborative environment. So it's not just one person using language one time, it's really changing the culture of an organization as well, having a really big impact on that. So the belonging, the respect, the inclusion, absolutely. And then, and then really this ability to have culture change come along with it too. So it's really a powerful exercise when you start getting people to buy in, to engage, to get excited about it. So I think there's a lot of benefits when you really start to see it expand into the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let me ask you this, Andrew. I think you want to say something.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you, Emma. I love the amplified impact, the multiplier. It starts like a spark, and then it becomes a big energizer for everybody to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. Now, let me ask you, all of you are on a journey, but you are very aware of your own struggles, to use the word that Danny used before, your own the limitations of what you know today and what you're learning. You are probably much more aware of your own biases about inclusive language than people who are beginning this journey are. So for anybody who is, zero judgment, no criticism, it's more, how do we bring them on board to the journey, and how do we get them closer to the place where the three of you are right now, rather than just the beginning of the journey? How can we help them increase their own awareness about their biases, how their biases may be impacting their everyday interactions at work or the decisions that they are making at work, how their own biases and limitations may be sort of driving them to use words that they think are normal but are not really inclusive? So how do we help them increase that level of awareness? What do we do? What do you recommend to them? Danny, and then we go with Emma.
Awesome. Yeah, I can kick us off, and then we can expand on this conversation. So one of the things that I usually do is, again, going back to actually what inclusive language is, because again, it is more than just being inclusive of different genders or different sexual orientations, right? Like, at the base of inclusive language, we have something that it's called plain language. And plain language, what it means is being able to communicate with each other in a way that we understand ourselves. So I'm going to give you an example. Say that you go to the doctor, right? Like, forget about your HR background, forget about diversity and inclusion. You go to the doctor, and the doctor starts explaining whatever it is that you have in very medical terms. You won't understand them, of course, unless you have a medical background yourself. You won't understand what the doctor is trying to tell you. Or for whatever reason, you buy a medicine and you're trying to read like the way that you're supposed to take it, and you're not familiar with those words, you might take it wrong. So what I usually do is try to position yourself in that situation. You're having a conversation with your doctor. If you were the doctor, if you were trying to explain yourself, what is it that is going on? How would you do it? Like, what words do you use? How you break it down a little bit more so you can actually have a conversation that is meaningful for both of you and that you both can understand each other. And that's actually the base, again, of inclusive language. So once you start understanding and seeing that inclusive language is pretty much everywhere, and not only on HR and diversity inclusion, it is a little bit easier to start paying attention to, okay, maybe I need to phrase this a little bit different. Maybe these words I need to learn or remove from my vocabulary. So again, if we are all going to start doing a little bit of research today, I would probably suggest to start with plain language first, and then we can amp it up to inclusive language, which is like a little bit there.
Oh, I love that. And by the way, not having that plain language is like speaking different languages and not understanding each other. That as the foundation of inclusive language is such a great, easy to understand start point to increase your awareness. So thank you so much for that. And that's a good message, by the way, for HR, because very often we use some jargon that maybe people know what it is, but they don't know what it means for them. And that's a problem, because then we are not getting our message across. We're not creating a strong business case. We're not getting the allies and the champions that we need for something, because we're using that sort of jargon that sounds beautiful and it only makes sense for us, but not for other folks. So thank you, Danny, for that. Emma, we'll go with you and then Danny.
Yeah, I love that, Danny. And building on that, the word intention came up a couple times throughout the conversation. And so some of this is about being really intentional about education, right? Training, really building that in, holding actual training sessions, giving that space to learn about this. It doesn't just have to come up naturally. It can really be something that an organization commits to and put some dollars and resources behind to actually make sure people feel empowered and that they have an opportunity to get the education and the training that they need. So that's what I would also bring into the conversation.
Thank you, Emma, for that. I'm going to reserve part of that for a question, for the last question of the panel in a few minutes. So thank you for bringing that up. Andrew?
Yeah, actually, Donnie made me think something about at work, though she was giving an example with the doctor. A few years back, I joined an organization and they would say words like, I see. And I'm like, what is an IC? Because before that, I only used individual contributor. It sounded silly because few times it kept happening. And I'm like, is that something that I do not understand? And I didn't get it. Okay. Very recently, I joined another job. And in a few emails, I saw the word HO. And I'm trying to figure what HO would mean. It was just handoff. I could not understand. And I feel so silly about it. But while we're in the same company for a long time, we tend to use acronyms so often that we do not understand from a new hire's perspective. Mm-hmm. And I want to mention an example of an ally. Somebody in my previous role actually became an ally and realized that I was struggling with few of these terms because it was new to me. They would actually pause the meeting and say, hey, just context for Anju, and explain to me without making me feel silly about asking it, without making me feel little about or embarrassed asking something that probably for the rest of the group was very obvious. So having those allies has been a great, and sometimes we have stories from previous meetings or sales kickoff, and 2 years back, this happened in a team meeting and everybody's laughing about it. And I'm not part of that conversation. So I feel left out and I'm not part of the same experience. Yeah. So I want to highlight that, though how simple this might sound, jargons and acronyms could actually delay a person's productivity and onboarding by a great deal if it's not handled well.
Oh, I think that is so absolutely powerful. And I have to say this, Andrew, about that. For those of us who, first of all, English is our second language to begin with. Second, we're coming from different countries, and which I think is at least the case for Danny, Andrew, and myself. I don't know, Emma. Maybe a New Yorker, but yeah. So for the three of us coming from different countries, even those acronyms and the nuances of some conversations are hard. Not because we don't understand, it's because we never used them before. So this is something that I'm hoping that you take away, especially as you build multinational workforces with people that will never probably come to the US because they're working in different countries and you will never bring them here for whatever reason it is. And that language has to be understood by them. One thing that comes to my mind, by the way, is some of the jargon and the slang. There are things that now I know being in the US, but when I think about them, I'm like, this means nothing for somebody who has never been in the US, this kind of slang expression or whatever. So, Andrew, thank you so much for bringing that. Having those allies guiding you, it's just so, so powerful. Danny, I think you want to add something.
Yeah,
here.
very quickly, and adding on to what you were saying, like jargon and using those words, it actually goes beyond like international candidates, right? Like going back to diversity and inclusion and trying to hire a diverse workforce. Say that we are trying to hire someone that comes from a completely different industry than ours. Like, why does KPI have to mean anything for anyone, right? So again, it's going back to plain language, which leads to inclusive language, and using language that we all understand.
I love that. Thank you, Danny. We have time for 2 maybe quick questions with quick answers as quick as possible, right? But first question of the last 2 is, what do you tell to people that are exhausted of trying to create inclusive language in their organizations, only to find out that they do the right thing and they do it over and over and over again, and people continue using the same words, the same expressions, the same whatever language they are using that is not following those guidelines of inclusive language? There are people who are exhausted of doing that right now. What do you tell them?
Very quickly, unless they're misgendering someone or intentionally hurting someone, it's completely fine. We all make mistakes. I mean, this is a very long journey. Language is evolving all the time. We are evolving all the time. It is fine. I do draw the line with when like someone is misgendering someone or using the wrong pronouns for someone.
Thank you, Danny. Andrew?
Sorry. Yeah. I was just thinking about what Danny said. I
think I got you thinking. I interrupted your thinking, by the way. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Emma, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I think, talking about that self-care is important. So if people are exhausted, what can help them rejuvenate that battery, or just feel, what are the small things that they can continue to incorporate in where they take a break on some of the stretch areas? As Anju said earlier, you have those circles, the green, the yellow, and the orange or red, I think, right? And so, yeah, maybe hone back and pull it in a little bit, focus on the green, focus on the yellow, and maybe take a pause in some of the areas that are really pushing you outside of that comfort zone. So it's a lot of it is about that self-regulation, that awareness. You don't have to be on 24/7. You don't have to be perfect 24/7. So when can you, take that extra step, and when do you need to be a little bit more, reserved so that you have a chance to maintain, right? And so I think that's an important message.
No, I love that. And to sustain the pace, by the way, because this is like Danny said before, this is a long journey. And it's not only is it a long journey, it's a journey that is changing. The paths are changing and the signs are changing and the rules are changing all the time. So we have to give ourselves even more grace in this space because it's evolving really fast. Anju, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking on how best to. So one is, of course, technology. How can you scale best practices is using technology. So deploy the tools when you can. Providing safe space could also go to coaching and mentorship. What kind of support can happen? So even in D&I space, usually there's limited teams, but could you create culture champions? Somebody who could I reach out and say, hey, I'm making this mistake quite often and I've been called upon. Honestly, I'm trying to do this as often as I can, but I'm still continuing. What would you recommend that I do? So coaching and mentorship. And then the last one is providing people language on what to say when you make a mistake. So
I love
something
that.
From, hey, I didn't mean it, to could it change to, I hear Emma, Danny, Enrique, what you say, and I'm going to learn and do better. Even something as simple as that is helpful, and mean it. Truly mean it. Go back and educate yourself on how to do better at that.
Oh, I love that. And by the way, we posted something on our LinkedIn page. I think it was about a couple of weeks ago, talking about ways to say I'm sorry. And it's just that, right? I mean, being on a journey, you're gonna make mistakes, and that's part of the journey. And the way you, even the way you say I'm sorry, has to reflect that you are genuine, that you genuinely care, that you're genuinely aware, and that that you're on the journey, that you're not doing it because you're going out of your way to hurt people, but because you are on the journey. All right, my last question. briefly again, since we have like 2 minutes left, for those who are in the audience or listening to the replay, inspired to build more inclusive workplaces through inclusive language, and they are beginning to build this for their organizations. Now it's not just the individual, it's what they do for the rest of the organization. What 2 things, maybe 1 or 2 things that you can tell them they can work on, focus on to begin this journey for the organization? A couple of things that you can recommend to anybody here. Danny, we'll go with you.
Yeah, so I would recommend starting by putting together like a framework or guidelines, right? And not focus so much specifically about what words are not inclusive and what words are inclusive, because again, like language changes and evolves. So making sure that we have some framework or guidelines on what inclusive language is, what we are trying to accomplish with it, and how it will benefit our organization and how it can benefit themselves and their colleagues. So that's how I would start.
Love it, Danny. Thank you. By the way, talking about all the things that we post online on our Hacking HR LinkedIn page, which is a lot of things. Recently, we posted a fascinating guide to build inclusive language by Oxfam. It's really, really cool. And you're going to have to scroll down a lot on our LinkedIn page to find it. It's somewhere there. But talking about frameworks, please, that like Danny suggested, go to that guide because it does provide great fundamental pillars, perhaps, to build that framework rather than just going to the specifics. So thank you, Danny. Emma, we go with you and we close with Andrew.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So I think starting small is also a good thing. We talked earlier about people who are already engaged in this or passionate about it. I saw comments in the chat actually of someone who said, get those people who are excited about it and use them to continue spreading the word. So starting off with a smaller group of people to educate them, they can become language champions for you, communication champions for you. They can help give some insights into how to prioritize different things. So building on what Danny said, that framework is wonderful. And then having a group of people who maybe can help test the framework is also a really great idea as well. So it doesn't have to be an org-wide initiative from day one necessarily.
Yeah. Thank you, Emma. Thank you for that. Last but not least, Anju, please go ahead.
Thank you. So +1 to the framework on what's okay and how to build that inclusive library. Number 2 would be, yes, engage your champions, including employee resource groups and allyship through that. But also allowing people to have a growth mindset and talk about it and talk about mistakes that happen and what we learned out of it. So being your own vulnerability, I like, Enrique, how you started with saying these are the mistakes that I've made and I continue to make, and I'm educating myself. I think when these kind of stories come from other people, we're more courageous to walk on that journey. And then we'll wrap it up by saying, keep an open mind, engage your growth mindset, know that we all are still searching for answers and we're not perfect, and continue on progress, not perfection, and highlight that.
Oh, I love that. And I love also, this connects very, very well with something you said before, Andrew, which is, you got to be curious, genuinely curious, right? You can ask people about things, about words and expressions, because nobody's going to come to you and say like, oh, you're so awful for asking me, if you can say this or say that. If you're coming from a place of genuinely care and curiosity, they will gladly tell you, yes, that word is not inclusive for, for this group or that other group, right? And we are on a journey for that. Yeah, please go ahead.
Sorry, I want to add, because there's a very nice comment that came up in the chat right now. We probably sometimes living in our own bubble. So if we're only thinking US specific, so did not mention cultural humility in this conversation. Yeah. And sorry, that was a miss, but being aware of other cultures and being careful about the language and what could be detrimental, what could be hurtful when you're saying XYZ. So yes, thank you, Rob, for highlighting that US is not the center of the world.
No.
We're thinking about global.
Yeah, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because believe me, I do struggle with that since I organize all of these things. It's hard because, first of all, it's US time based generally. Most of the people generally are in the US, not always, but most of the people are in the US. And we had this conversation actually about a couple of months ago where somebody said, we're talking about this as if it's the law of the land in all the lands. And it's not always the case, right? I mean, there are cultural differences that put context to the conversations that we're having. And it's for those of you who are in America, who are in the US, and you are thinking about how you do this for your multinational workforces, the cultural element, you gotta have it in mind, front and center in everything that you do, because otherwise you may think that you're doing something that is super cool, but then it's actually not that cool for other groups of people in other cultures. So Rob in the chat, Andrew, thank you so much for bringing that up. Danny, Andrew, Emma, this was an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, with the community, and sharing all these insights with everybody. Everybody listening to this conversation or watching, this is part of our Hacking HR April series. I think this is actually the second or the third session of April. We have many more. Go to the Hacking HR Lab, hackinghr.io, create your account or sign in to your existing account. You will find a lot of content, including the upcoming sessions as part of our Hacking HR April series. Then the May series is all things mental health. And then the June series is all things career development and job search. So thank you so much once again, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.